Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer or artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field, along with contest winners and a few surprise guests. Today we are speaking with Ken Scholes. Ken was a winner way back in 2005 in Rise to Future Volume 21 with his short story, Into the Blank Where Life is Hurled, and he's lived a whole lot of life since then. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thanks, John. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so back in 2005, we were in Seattle, Washington, which wasn't that much of a flight for you, but it was a great trip for me to go up there because it's such a beautiful area. So let's just, first, before we get into a lot of other stuff of tips and ideas for aspiring writers, just coming forward a little bit about, with you since having won in 2005, because you've been pretty much Mr. Eclectic. You've been a gun repairman, a sailor, a soldier, a preacher, a nonprofit exec, and all that with the history from Western Washington University. So what's life been like since 2005?
Well, Writers of the Future was a great launch for me. I'd only submitted twice. I submitted once for a short story that I actually went on and sold to a small press market. I think it was my third short story sale.
Yeah.
And then I submitted for the second time in 2004 and ended up winning. And then after that, I got dared into writing my first novel, which turned into a 5-book contract with Tor. And a 5-book series, which the first novel came out in 2009, Lamentation, and then there were 4 more after until it wrapped up with him. And then along the way, I started picking up, I picked up more short story sales. I have 3 collections now, over 50 short stories that I've seen out the gate since I started. And this year, 2020 is going to mark 20 years since I first broke into print, and we just released a new little book called If Dragons Mass Eve Be Cold and Clear. Just came out from Fairwood Press. It's a beautiful little paperback of a holiday story.
Oh, that's nice. And is writing still your major calling, your major source of income, I guess, for your life?
It's not, it was never really a major source of income because writing doesn't pay super well, but it was definitely a source. It was a source of some income and a source of joy. I was able to be full time for a bit when I was married and had a working spouse. But I would say that writing is still a passion of mine, but it's not. It's not going to pay my bills necessarily. It may at some point turn a corner, but. For now, I'm working on some shorter fiction projects, and then I'm also I'm a musician. I've been playing music for 30 some years, and I've just finally got my first album dropping in January, just in time for my 52nd birthday.
That was a part of you.
Pardon?
That was a part of you I did not know about. I just knew about the writer side. So this was when you told me that when you recently got back in communication about that, I was fascinated and looking forward to hear you talk about it. I just wanted to put that in there because this is fascinating.
Yeah. Well, and that you that's a part of me that you missed very slowly while I was building myself up as a writer out there in the convention circuit. I was traveling with my guitar if it was a convention that I didn't have to fly to. I finally had a change of heart about flying with my guitar a couple of years back, and now I take it everywhere if I go someplace, because I've come to accept that music is just as much a part of my expression of life as my writing ever was. And when you combine the two, go into a room and tell funny stories about being a writer and then sing a couple of songs, it creates kind of a nice experience. So one of the things that was nice in my life in 2012, when I did quit my job for a little while, I started playing gigs, and I hadn't done a lot of regular playing since the days of being a gospel singer back when I was a preacher. So it was, I was getting out into bars and coffee shops. And so now I play here in Portland. If anybody's ever in town, this includes you and the gang.
Yeah.
I play every other month at the Rose City Book Pub, which is this wonderful little bookstore that serves food and drink. That's just a great little place, and I play there every other month in Portland, and then I play around the area other places as well. The live album, the album that's dropped, is a recording of a live show I played out in St. Helens, a Village and Lounge, where I played First Fridays for about 4 years.
So is this country, or is this folk, or is this pop, or what kind of
Kind of
music?
kind of a folk rock, alternative sensibility. Um, it would take nothing to get me on a stage with a guitar. Yeah, to read or to sing. I mean, either one. So, but yeah, that's been a nice area to explore more in my life, and it's what I'd been doing before. When I left, before I left the ministry, I had written around 75 gospel songs, and that's where I had primarily been exploring my creativity,
Right.
because I wasn't writing fiction, and then I started writing fiction, and then of course when I jumped into that 5-book series over the course of a decade, along with a bunch of short stuff. I got a little tired. So after 2016, when I finished the series, I decided to take a little sabbatical from fiction. And I didn't come back to it again until 2018. I wrote a short story. And now this year, I started outlining a series of short novels in the same universe as my series, but picking up later. And exploring another kind of path through the events of the last part of my 5-book tour. And then of course, I'll write any short story for anybody that wants it. But I think that the creative, the creative impulse, whether you're an illustrator or a writer or a musician, I think you just live your life in a way that you can collect raw material that you then turn into your art. You kind of bend it into art, like balloons into little animals. And the contest gives you a great place to kind of ground yourself. I mean, I'm still running with people that I met 15 years ago in Seattle, and I'm still friends with my judges. As a matter of fact, one of my judges is a publisher of mine now, Kevin J. Anderson.
Oh, wow.
He
Yeah.
published a book with Jay and I. And so I mean, those, and he's bought short stories from me. So these relationships continue deep into your life, just like, you and I are still in touch 15 years later. But I mean, we have to, the number one thing that we all have to get over in order to move through it is ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And that's the story of overcoming, is getting out of the way of all the noise in our heads or the distractions, the other things that show up. But I think that people who create, I don't know. I can't imagine a different kind of life. I mean, I can move between fiction and nonfiction. I can move between music and writing. But I can't imagine not creating.
So you've got 2 children. How old are they now?
I have twin daughters. They're 10 years old now.
So how do you juggle being a single parent with your twins and your creativity? Do you find that enhances it? How does that fit in, or how have you made it work?
Earlier it was a lot harder. It was harder. I had a harder time when I wasn't living alone, parenting them, half time on my own. But now, I think the thing that changed is my expectation level on myself. I adjusted, and I took on a quieter, slower pace. I intentionally slowed down and decided to stop and smell the roses, as they say.
Uh-huh.
And by doing that, by not killing myself with pressure, I now just move between the things that I want to work on when I want to work on them. So I have plenty of time. I always did. Usually we do. We just don't know how to access the muscle that has us use that time well, right? So when I want to work on a project, the kids do their own thing and I just do that work. I don't do anything to the point where, I'm lost for hours on end, right? I am checking in with them, and I'm just not as caught up. I guess that's maybe the better way to say it is I'm just not as caught up in it all as I used to be. So I can enjoy it while it's happening.
So you're
Does that
able
make
to
sense?
write, yeah. So you're able to write and enjoy your writing, or your music and enjoy your music, and being a father and enjoy that.
Yeah, and I don't put pressure on myself about, I'm a lousy dad because I played this show, or I'm a lousy musician because I turned down a show to go do this thing with my kid. I mean, I don't do those games with myself. I don't create my own agony, so to speak. I'm grateful when I get to play a show. I'm grateful when I get to hang with my kids. They're as a matter of fact, I'm sitting in my recliner in the living room. They're with their mom tonight, and we decorated the house yesterday. So I'm sitting in a sea of Christmas lights right now. And the tree that they picked out, our first Christmas on our own, they picked out the tree that had the brightest lights built in already.
Wow.
So yeah, right. And it's got a dial, so I've got it set to something that won't induce a seizure. But but it's nice. I'm sitting here in the glow of Christmas.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice.
It is.
So
It
now,
is.
over the years, when I know you don't so much do the convention circuit these days, but was there anything that you found as a commonality that people were asking you, or that you're able to provide to aspiring writers that they really appreciated?
I think my favorite part, and so it kind of brings up it's been the toughest part of this has been, the best part of this has been the people I meet, and the toughest part has been saying goodbye to those people. And we just lost John just in October. He's one of my closest friends, going back 22 years. And we lost Jay 5 years ago, Jay Lake.
Yeah.
And those two guys taught me so much, but particularly John and I used to. One of the things that we were getting ready to go start doing it again, actually. But we used to go after we'd been doing this for a while, and we've been, going to conventions for over a decade and all of that. We put together a class that we would teach where writers could just sit and ask questions about anything at all. Because there wasn't, there were a lot of panels that were focused on different topics, but there really wasn't a place other than the bar where you could just ask writers all the questions you ever wanted to ask. That was a piece that I know people in later years have said they really valued. We would get a room and we would have 2 hours, and we would get every question up on the wall around the room, and we would just go through all of the different craft and business questions. It was super simple, but it seemed to resonate with people. And then go ahead.
No, I was saying that's interesting, because one of our best podcasts is the one from the panel. We switched the format of our panels at conventions now. At the recent one at Dragon Con, we did the first about 20 minutes just talking about the contest and some various things on entering the contest. And the last 30, 40 minutes was just come up and ask all the judges questions. And we had Brandon Sanderson, and we had Rob Sawyer, and Kevin Anderson, and Rebecca Mesta, and several others. There were about 8 different judges that were up there that just people could ask whatever questions. And that's been the best podcast, because people, they're interested in tips of what works, but also what's important, with what you're saying is the inspiration, which is really important, because people aren't used to reject. How do you overcome that? How do you deal with that? How do you maintain confidence to move on? And that's why this podcast is so important.
It is. Well, and people do. There's a perseverance that it takes a certain amount of grist to do it, because I think I was rejected 75 times before my first sale. But eventually, once you start selling, once you start consistently writing marketable fiction, that's really what it's about, right? Is it take a while, and I'm super curious to see how it is. When I came to all of this, we had the gatekeeper of the editorial process, but now with independent publishing, it's a really different critter out there, I think.
It is different, and I recently did an interview with the publisher of Tor. You mentioned that you've done that. So I talked to Tom Doherty. He was out in LA recently for World Fantasy, and I asked him about the change of landscape, and he said, regardless of the self-publishing, there's always going to be a need for what a publisher can provide to guarantee good material out there for the reader. And it's unfortunate because now anything can go, and it can be discouraging. And that was the same problem that we had earlier on with audiobooks. Anybody can just say they can read a book and put it up there. And if that's the first thing you listen to, then you're like, I don't like audiobooks. So it's important to have that. I think that the publisher there that can help provide the needed tools to guarantee that when a guy's going to invest his $10 or $15, it's going to be money well spent.
It really, yeah. And I'm not, I think that people can do very well in independent publishing. They have, and I'm not. It's a great platform, especially for people who have a backlist of books that they've already seen published, and they just need to get them back out into the world. There's so many different positives from it, but there was also something really positive about being told no over and over again until I got good enough.
Yeah.
Until I practiced my craft to the point where I was internalizing the mechanics of good storytelling. And there are people, the folks out there that are hiring editors and doing a good job of building their stories and building their craft while they do it. I think there are lots of success stories on both sides of that coin. But I really love that I got, I was kind of part of that generation that came through, throwing my stories in the mail, in an envelope, to a magazine. I just think the experience for me was valuable.
And the point you make on that, once you've already got now your backlist that you can go off as on your own on independent lines to be able to sell that. That's what Kevin did. He was doing, and he created WordFire to provide him an outlet for selling his backlist. And it grew from that. That was what it was as a solution to. So that makes sense. But it also makes sense to go through I don't know if you say trial by fire, but to go through a proper experience so that when the audience gets something they're going to read, it's going to I like this guy. And it helps to guarantee you're going to have yourself a good first impression.
Yeah. Well, I love the way that it went for me. And I got dared into it. I was going to write short stories. I had no interest in writing novels. But I got dared into writing Lamentation, and that turned into a relationship with Tor and a series that I'm really proud of. I think the Psalms of Isaak, it was not commercially successful, but it picked up some nice awards. It picked up great reviews. The people who love it really love it, and you can still find it out there in the world. My favorite version at this point is the Audible versions because they did such a great job with the voice cast. Yeah, I love that I got to be a part of all of that, and I'm still at it. I've slowed way down.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll speed up because I'm really interested in seeing what happens with the other parts of my life, and I'm also working. I still have a job in the public sector. I'm in public procurement. I've got 10 years. I started at the county the same year I won Writers of the Future. I took a 4-year break to be with my kids, but I've been, at the same job really since 2005.
Wow. And just as going back a little bit here, you were mentioning some of your the people that you met and the people that you lost. You mentioned Jay Lake because he was like a dear friend for me as well. And I remember seeing him at the San Diego Comic-Con. He said, this will be my last convention. But it's interesting because he signed a copy of his last book, Green, for me. But the artist who painted that, Dan Dos Santos, we just brought on. He just became an illustrator, featured judge, and he illustrated. He painted that cover, and he's also done covers for several other judges and winners. He's done with Diana Rowland and for Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss, Mike Resnick. So it's great how the contest continues to grow and how, despite how big science fiction and fantasy is, it really is, when you get down to the core of the community, it really isn't that big of a community.
It's not. It's a family, and he's also He's the cover artist for John Pitt's Tor series with the Sarah Bohal books.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
when Tor dropped that series, Kevin J. Anderson picked it up at Wordfire, so he's publishing John's fifth novel. Is coming out. I mean, it's coming out posthumously at this point, but it'll be out, I think anytime soon. Different cover artists, but isn't it interesting how that world just kind of, it's such a small world.
Yeah, when we met Dan at DragonCon earlier this year, we tried to tell him, we saw him walking by, and we wanted to pitch him on Writers of the Future books, and he says, "I know that contest," and he started talking about it, and then it just rapidly evolved that he was absolutely interested in the contest and follow up later on. So it very rapidly escalated into becoming a judge for the contest because he himself had observed what it has done for the industry, both writers and illustrators, now 36 years later.
Yeah, no, it's been great for me. I'm still, like I was saying, I'm still friends with folks I met in Seattle. And, the workshop was a great experience. Somebody just was asking about my 24-hour story, which went, of course, went on to sell eventually, right?
Yeah.
Tor.com paid me nice money for that. But that it was just, it's a great experience. I also had the benefit because of how things went for me and with the Ford deal. You all brought me down a few times to talk to the other winners and attend award ceremonies, and I had a great couple of visits down for that. So, yeah,
definitely. So, why should an aspiring writer enter the contest? Because they can just go to self-publishing. You can just go to, I'm just going to put my stuff up and just let it go. Why should they enter the contest?
Well, I entered it because I saw it as a valuable market in the industry.
Yeah.
It was respected. It was one of the only, maybe the only market that paid you. Plus, if they sent you to a workshop for a week with some of the top names in the field.
You had Anne McCaffrey at years, I think, that year.
I did. As a matter of fact, I did. I think that I had her and Larry Niven and Jerry Pornell and Jay Spoke and Kevin and Rebecca. All of them were just amazing. And Tim Powers and Katie Wentworth were our teachers, and they were wonderful. All of the experience was really positive for me, and what it opened up doors. It was my first pro level sale. So I'd made a bunch of small press sales, but I was still eligible for the contest. It was my first pro level sale, and it was followed almost immediately by a second pro level sale. Suddenly you put in your cover letter that you'd won Writers of the Future. And in that second sale was the short story that turned into Lamentation. And so everything happened very fast for me after Writers of the Future. I had a novel within a year. I had an agent and a 5-book deal within 2 years. And I was off to the races, really moving pretty hard and fast until 2015, maybe 2014, when Jay died. I slowed down quite a bit, and then really slowed down after I finished the series.
So on your music and your storytelling, what can we look forward to in the future now? What stories or music? Or both? Sure,
both. I think we're going to see a little bit of everything coming out of me. I'm working on a nonfiction book now called Experiencing Life, an Owner's Manual. And that's almost self-help, kind of a reflection on the big lessons learned. And then I've started this short novel, long novella project called Pilgrims to the Dream. And the first little volume is called Winds of Ash on Homeward Sail. So I'm working on that now. That's I'm taking notes, and this is the first big fiction project that's laid its teeth in me since I finished the series. So I feel pretty good about having fun with that. And then with the album, I have the live album releasing here just in the next month or so. And then I'm in the studios very slowly. It's going to take a year or two. But we're going to slowly lay down a studio version of this live album.
And
So,
is this a solo? Is this solo or is this with a
it's solo work. I'll be bringing in. I play guitar and I do vocals and harmonicas, and of course, I'll bring in any other musicians. With the live show, I have a show that I also recorded with a jazz musician, and so if this live show works well, I may follow up with this other live show.
Wow.
But the initial one is the other one is solo work, and I sent you up a few songs. So you'll have to give them a listen and let me know what you think. And if you ever need a musician, I know this guy. But I'm not that far away, right?
That's a fact.
I can hop a plane. I can hop a plane pretty fast, John.
That's a fact.
And now I fly with my guitar, right? I finally decided that I have insurance. I can fly with my guitar. And now, so one thing you can see more from me in the future is more music. And then, at least once a year, I go out and teach writing. I do if I can. This year I did a one-day workshop for Clarion. I went up to Canada for a workshop a few years back, and I went out to the coast a couple of years back. So I like to get out. I don't do the conventions, but if a workshop says, "Hey, we'd like you to come and teach," I'm always willing to go do that. Always willing to write a short story if an editor wants one. And then writing music, playing shows, being a dad, just kind of enjoying my life at a quieter, gentler pace, with my eyes a little wider open and my mouth more closed.
So if somebody wants to find you, how do they find you?
Well, I still have a few slots on my Facebook wall. So Facebook friend me. That's a great way, fast way to have a chat with me if you want to. You can also find me at kenscholes.com. And there's a place there where you can check out the music or you can get a note over to me. I'm easily found.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Ken. It's been really a pleasure for me to speak with you after all these years. I see you on Facebook periodically, and then when your most recent post about the loss of your best friend, I said, okay, I need to call him and talk to him because I miss being able to talk to you. And so I'm so glad you gave me this opportunity here.
Oh, happy to, John. And hey, I am always here. And if you're ever in Portland, let me know.
I will. And thank you, listeners, for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged. It is free to enter and open to new and amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. Once again, thank you very much, Ken.
Hey, thank you, John.